Have you ever been so close to death that you felt its breath on your skin? That cold, hollow certainty that you are about to disappear. Your story unfinished. Your life cut short? I was there once. I was 19, and it should have been the end for me. But what if dying wasn't the worst thing that could happen? What if, in that moment, something or someone offered you a way out? A second chance? Would you take it? Would you agree to their terms, even if you didn't know what they were? I made that choice. In my desperation, I said yes, clinging to life with trembling hands. I didn't ask the price. I didn't ask who or what was offering it. I just agreed. When I woke up, I was told it was a miracle. The doctors said I shouldn't be alive. They marveled at my recovery, shaking their heads as though they'd seen something impossible. I tried to believe them. I tried to convince myself I'd been given a second chance, that I was lucky. But I wasn't lucky. I was marked. At first, everything seemed fine. Life went on. The accident faded into memory, and I almost forgot. Almost. But there was always this feeling, like I wasn't alone, like something was watching, waiting. This is the story of what happened after I survived. It's a story about the price I paid, the horrors I faced, and the moment I realized I'd never escape what I agreed to that night. What you're about to hear, it will make you question everything you think you know about life, death, and what comes after. So, let me ask you one more question before we begin. What would you have done in my place? I was just an ordinary teenager, 19, college student, life ahead of me. I didn't think much about death, not really. It's the kind of thing you think happens to other people, something far off in the future. For me, it was all late-night study sessions, bad cafeteria food, and road trips with friends. That night, I was driving back from one of those road trips. The sky was pitch black, the kind of darkness where even the stars seemed to vanish. It was quiet, peaceful even, until it wasn't. I don't remember the exact moment it happened, just flashes. The headlights of an oncoming truck. The scream of metal as my car spun out of control. The crunch when the side of the car crumpled like paper beneath the impact. Then nothing. When I came to, I couldn't move. My body was pinned under the wreckage, my chest crushed under the weight of the dashboard. There was blood, warm and sticky, pooling around me. I couldn't even tell where it was coming from anymore. My lungs burned with every shallow gasp. The pain was unbearable, but it wasn't the worst part. It was the cold. This creeping, unnatural cold that started in my fingers and toes and spread upward, swallowing me whole. I knew I was dying. I could feel it. The way your body knows when it's about to shut down, when there's nothing left to hold on to. At first, I thought I was imagining it, a hallucination from the shock. But then it came again, louder this time, like it was inside my head, but also everywhere around me. Do you want to live? I couldn't speak. I didn't have the strength, but I managed to choke out one word, a word I'd give anything to take back now. Yes. The pain stopped instantly, just gone. The sirens faded into silence, and for a moment I thought I'd died. But then the voice came again, calm and deliberate. You'll live, but you will never escape me. And just like that, I woke up in the hospital. No broken bones, no cuts, no bruises. The doctors called it a miracle. They said I should have been dead on arrival, that my injuries were too severe to survive. But by the time the paramedics got to me, there wasn't a scratch on me. They called it divine intervention. My friends and family were overjoyed, but I couldn't share their relief. I didn't feel blessed. I felt wrong, like something had shifted, like I'd crossed a line I was never meant to cross. I didn't know it yet, but that night changed everything. It wasn't just my life I saved, it was something else entirely. And in that moment, I made a choice I would regret forever. When I woke up, everything was painfully bright. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed faintly, cutting through the haze of unconsciousness. My body felt whole. There was no pain, no stiffness, just a strange, empty stillness, as if I'd been pieced back together, but not quite right. The doctors stood at the foot of my bed, their faces pale, drawn with confusion. One of them, a middle-aged man with kind eyes, was holding a clipboard, but he wasn't writing anything. He kept shaking his head, muttering something about how this wasn't possible. "You shouldn't be here," he finally said, looking me straight in the eyes. "By all accounts, you shouldn't have survived that crash." I didn't know how to respond. My mind was blank, still processing the wreckage, the voice, the impossible bargain I'd made. They showed me pictures of the car, or what was left of it. A twisted hulk of metal, scorched and shattered. No one should have walked away from that. And yet, there I was, alive, breathing, whole. My family called it a miracle. My friends came to visit, their faces lit with relief and awe. They told me how they'd prayed, how they'd begged for a second chance. But every time someone said the word miracle, a cold knot tightened in my chest. Because I knew better. The voice's words echoed in my head. "You'll live, but you will never escape me." At first, I tried to push it away, convincing myself it was just the trauma talking. But even then, there were signs. Little things, subtle enough that I almost missed them. Almost. It started with the shadows. They seemed wrong. Too dark, too sharp, moving in ways they shouldn't have. I'd catch glimpses of them out of the corner of my eye, just for a second, always gone when I turned to look. And then there was the cold. It wasn't the kind of chill you get from an open window or a drafty room. It was deeper, sharper, like the air itself was recoiling from something unseen. And then there were the whispers. They came at night, just as I was drifting off to sleep. At first, they were faint, almost indistinguishable from the rustling leaves outside my window. But soon they grew louder, clearer. They weren't words exactly, more like fragments, broken syllables strung together in a language I didn't understand. But somehow, I knew they were meant for me. I started avoiding mirrors. I couldn't explain why, but every time I passed one, I felt a pull, a heavy, suffocating weight that made my chest tighten. It wasn't fear exactly. It was recognition, like something on the other side was waiting, watching. I told myself it was all in my head, that the accident had messed me up more than I realized. But deep down I knew the truth. Whatever had saved me that night, whatever had pulled me back from the brink, it hadn't done it for free. And now it was waiting to collect. They say the hardest part of survival is learning to live again. For me, survival was just the beginning. Because behind the scenes, something darker had begun to stir, something I couldn't explain, something I couldn't outrun. For years, I tried to rebuild my life. The shadows, the whispers, the cold. They became a part of me, a distant hum in the background that I learned to ignore. By all outward appearances, I was fine. I had a steady job, a small circle of friends, and even found myself laughing again. Life was almost normal, and then came my 30th birthday. It was supposed to be a celebration, a milestone. My friends insisted on throwing a party, and I let them. They meant well, and I was tired of being the person who always said no. The house was filled with music, laughter, and the warmth of familiar faces. For the first time in years, I almost believed I'd left the past behind. But then it happened. It started with the quiet. One moment, the room was alive with chatter and clinking glasses. The next, everything stopped. The music cut off mid-note, and the voices around me faded like the air had been sucked out of the room. I looked around, confused, but no one else seemed to notice. They were frozen, their faces caught mid-laugh, mid-drink, mid-sentence. And then I heard it. That voice. It wasn't a whisper this time. It was louder, clearer, and so close it felt like it was coming from inside my skull. Time to pay. My heart slammed against my chest. I turned in every direction, searching for the source, but there was nothing. Just the frozen faces of my friends, their eyes vacant, their smiles unervingly fixed. The room felt wrong, like the walls were leaning in, bending, distorting. The air grew heavy, pressing against my skin. I tried to call out, but my voice caught in my throat. And then the lights began to flicker. It wasn't just the voice anymore. Something else was there, something I couldn't see, but could feel. It moved through the room, brushing past me like an icy wind. My breath hitched as I felt it stop behind me, its presence cold and suffocating. I turned slowly, every muscle in my body screaming to run, to move, to do anything but face whatever was there. And yet there was nothing, just empty space where the presence had been. But I knew it was still there, watching, waiting. The voice came again, softer this time, but no less chilling. You thought you could escape. The lights flickered one last time before going out completely. The room was plunged into darkness, but the presence didn't leave. It wrapped around me, pressing against my chest, squeezing the air from my lungs. I stumbled backward, my hands clawing at nothing. And then, just as suddenly as it began, it stopped. When the lights came back on, the room was normal again. My friends were laughing. The music was playing, and no one seemed to notice anything had happened. They asked if I was okay, and I lied. I told them I was fine, but I wasn't. Something had changed. I could feel it. That night, as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, I realized the truth. The bargain I'd made all those years ago, it wasn't done with me. And that's when the true terror began.
It started small, just enough to make me question myself, to wonder if I was losing my grip on reality. A shadow moving across the corner of my eye in a room I knew was empty. A door I was certain I had closed creaking open on its own. At first I dismissed it, blamed it on exhaustion, on stress, on anything that made it feel less real. But it didn't stop. It didn't let me rest. One night, I was brushing my teeth, staring blankly into the bathroom mirror when I saw it. My reflection stood there, motionless, even though my hand was still moving. For a second, I froze, unable to believe what I was seeing. Then, as if it had been waiting for me to notice, my reflection's hand moved slowly, deliberately, trailing down the side of its face. It wasn't copying me anymore. It was doing something on its own. I backed away, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it would burst out of my chest. When I looked back, the reflection was normal again. But from that moment on, I knew I wasn't imagining it. Something was in my home, and it wasn't just watching. It was toying with me, The whispers started next. At first, they were so faint I thought they were part of a dream, soft, unintelligible murmurs that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere all at once. But they got louder, more distinct. They always came at night, when the house was still, when I was alone. At first, they were just sounds. Then they started saying my name. Hearing your own name spoken in a voice that doesn't belong to anyone you know, it does something to you. It makes your skin crawl, your stomach churn. And no matter how tightly I shut my eyes or covered my ears, it didn't stop. The voice was inside my head, rattling around, taking up space I couldn't block off. I tried everything. I thought maybe I was going insane, so I went to a therapist. I told them about the whispers, the shadows, the mirror. They listened, nodded, scribbled in their little notebook. And then they prescribed me pills. I took them. I took all of them. And the shadows kept moving. The whispers kept calling my name. And the reflection in the mirror. The reflection in the mirror started smiling at me. So I tried something else. I went to a priest. I didn't even know if I believed in that sort of thing, but I was desperate. He walked through the house, sprinkling holy water, muttering prayers under his breath. For a moment, I thought it might work. The air felt lighter, the house quieter. But then, as he stood in the center of the living room, his prayer faltered. He froze, his eyes widening, as if he'd seen something I couldn't. Without a word, he turned and ran. He didn't even close the door behind him. The psychics weren't any better. They came with their crystals, their incense, their chants. One by one, they left, all with the same excuse. There's something here, but it's beyond me. And they wouldn't say more. They wouldn't even look me in the eye. I was alone. Completely and utterly alone. I thought I could fight it. That if I kept moving, kept searching for answers, I could escape whatever it was that had latched onto me. But every step I took brought me closer to it. I didn't know it then, but I do now. Some battles aren't meant to be won. Some choices can never be undone. I didn't know it yet, but this was just the beginning. The things I'd seen, the whispers I'd heard, they were nothing compared to what was coming next.
It happened on a Tuesday. I remember because it was the first night I'd managed to fall asleep in days. Exhaustion had finally won, pulling me into a restless, uneasy slumber. I thought maybe, just maybe, I'd get one night of peace. But peace wasn't what it had in store for me. Something woke me, a sound, soft and deliberate, like a footfall on carpet. My eyes opened slowly, adjusting to the dark. At first, everything seemed normal, just shadows cast by the dim glow of the street light outside. But then I saw it. At the foot of my bed, a figure stood, tall, motionless, cloaked in darkness. Its outline was barely distinguishable from the shadows, but its eyes, they glowed red, not like fire, but cold and piercing, as if they could see through me, past my skin, into my thoughts. And then it smiled, a grin too wide for any human face, teeth glinting faintly in the dim light. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I was pinned beneath its gaze, every muscle in my body locked in place. The words were like ice, freezing me from the inside out. I wanted to scream, to reach for the lamp on my bedside table, to do anything. But all I could do was stare, my chest heaving as though I were suffocating. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, it was gone. The shadows swallowed it, leaving me alone in the suffocating silence of my room. I tried convincing myself it was a dream, a hallucination brought on by exhaustion. But the next night it came back, and the night after that. Each time it was closer. It no longer lingered at the foot of the bed. No, now it stood by my side, its breath cold against my face, carrying the stench of decay. Its grin stretched wider each time, its teeth sharper, its eyes burning brighter. I started sleeping with every light in the house on, but it didn't matter. It thrived in the shadows, bending them to its will, stretching them across the walls like long, grasping fingers. No matter how brightly I lit the room, it always found a way to appear. I tried confronting it. One night, as it leaned over me, its face so close I could feel its icy breath on my lips, I managed to force out a single word. Why? It tilted its head as if amused, its grin twisting into something even more grotesque. And then it whispered, its voice low and guttural, "Because you're mine." Its words echoed in my head long after it disappeared. They didn't feel like a threat. They felt like a promise. It didn't just visit me at night anymore. It followed me into the waking world. I'd catch glimpses of it in reflections, in windows, in mirrors, in the glossy surface of my coffee table. It was always there, watching, waiting. And the closer it got, the colder the air became. My skin prickled with the sensation of something brushing against me. But when I turned, there was nothing. Nothing visible, at least. Every night it grew bolder, more daring. It stopped trying to hide. It wanted me to see it, to feel its presence, to understand that I was never alone. I'd wake up gasping for breath, its face inches from mine, its grin stretching into the darkness. It didn't speak anymore. It didn't have to. The message was clear. There was no escaping it. I thought I understood fear, but this was something else entirely. And the worst part? I knew it was only just beginning. Desperation is a strange thing. It pushes you to act in ways you never imagined, to claw at the edges of reason in search of something, anything, that might save you. That's where I found myself, clinging to the remnants of hope as the shadows around me closed in. I smashed every mirror in the house, every polished surface that might betray its reflection. The jagged shards littered the floor like broken promises, glinting in the candlelight. But even as I destroyed them, I felt its gaze. It didn't need mirrors to watch me anymore. I found an old book in a second-hand shop, a dusty, leather-bound thing filled with symbols and words I didn't understand. I wasn't one to believe in rituals or spells, but I was past the point of skepticism. I lit candles, drew symbols on the floor with trembling hands, and whispered incantations into the suffocating air. For a moment, the air grew still, too still. The flickering candles froze, their flames standing upright, motionless. And then the sound came, a deep, resonant growl that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. It was here. The room was plunged into darkness, but I could feel it. Its presence was suffocating, pressing against my chest, wrapping around me like a shroud. I fumbled for the matches, desperate to relight the candles, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. And then I felt it. A cold, skeletal finger pressed against my lips, silencing the scream that clawed at my throat. Its touch burned like ice, stealing the breath from my lungs. I wanted to run, to fight, to do anything but sit there frozen in its grasp. But I couldn't. It didn't allow me to. I knew in that moment that it was over. No ritual, No prayer, no act of desperation would save me. This thing, it wasn't just in my home. It was in me, tied to my very existence. Running wouldn't help. Hiding wouldn't matter. It was patient, eternal, and I was already its. I did the only thing I could. I wrote this down hoping that maybe someone would find it. Maybe someone would heed my warning. Never bargain with the unknown. Whatever you're running from, whatever you're afraid of, fate, death, despair, none of it compares to what waits on the other side of that bargain. Death may be kinder. It may be the only true escape. But for me, it's too late. I see it now, in the corner of my eye. Its grin wider than ever. It's waiting, watching. And when I close this book, it'll take me. If you made it this far, I wonder, have you felt it? That prickling sensation on the back of your neck, the feeling of being watched. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's just your mind playing tricks on you. Or maybe it's something else. As you watch this, remember, you may not be alone. The story I've shared isn't just a warning. It's a question. What would you do? If the choice was between death and something far worse, could you resist the temptation? Would you take the risk? Perhaps you think this couldn't happen to you, that you'd never make the same mistake. But the thing about choices is they don't always feel like choices. Sometimes they're made for you. Before you go, take a moment to look around. Are you sure you're alone? Are you certain that what's behind you is just a wall, or the thing that's been watching you all along? Tell me, what would you do if you heard that voice? If you had to face that choice, share your thoughts in the comments. Maybe your story could help someone else avoid my mistake. Or perhaps you've already felt it, the cold breath on your neck, the whispers in the dark. If so, you're not alone. If you found this story as haunting as I did living it, make sure to subscribe for more. The darkness is full of tales. Some whispered, others screamed. I'll be here to share them. And remember, sometimes the scariest things aren't in the shadows. They're already with you,